very much. So let's go ahead and get started. This will be recorded, so please keep that in mind, and it will be available for YouTube a couple of days from now. So if you're watching the replay, it's obviously already up. So thank you all very much for being on, and we're going to get started. So today in our continuing webcast series on Informix features, we're going to start talking about Informix PSM, or otherwise known as Primary Storage Manager. Okay, a little bit about me. I've been working with Informix for over 15 years. I'm Director of Database Consulting here at Advanced Data Tools. Quick webcast guidelines. Again, the slides and the webcast will be available on our website in a couple of days and up on YouTube. Please mute your line just so we don't have anything coming through. And if you have any questions, feel free to add them to the chat button. We'll get to them periodically throughout the presentation, and then at the end we'll have a Q&A section. So, Primary Storage Manager. I've been wanting to do a talk about this for a little while. Actually, I did speak for a little while about it at our last Washington area Informix user group meeting, but have since expanded my presentation and wanted to put it out there. It is a feature that was introduced in version 12, and they have made a few updates to it along with all of the sub-releases of 12.10 of Informix. It's built into the product, so if you're running 12 of any edition, you already have this available. It is not very well, or I shouldn't say it's not well advertised, but it did not get quite the fanfare as some of the other 12 features, so I like to mention it. That's why I wanted to do the webcast on it, to get some people thinking about if this might be a solution for them. It came in as a replacement for the ISM storage manager. That was the old version 11 and even earlier storage manager. If you ever used it, it was hard to set up, it was slow, it was hard to maintain. Very few people stuck with it for long, but most people either went to a commercial storage manager, your Tivolis, your Commvaults, what have you, or they just used ONTape. They introduced PSM to have something that was easy to run, easy to manage, fast, to give people all of the tools with Onbar and all the advanced storage abilities of the big commercial applications as part of Informix natively. It also allows for very flexible and configurable storage, backup methodology. So you have a lot of control over your system with relatively easy configuration involved. So why would you want to use this? So let me take a step back. If you already are running Tivoli or Commvault or any number of the other commercial storage managers, you probably aren't going to use this for your production. You've already got something you're paying for. You probably have your team that's managing it. This isn't going to buy you a whole lot. However, if you have smaller instances that are not part of your larger storage management, you're currently running ONTape, maybe you are still running ISM from an old system that you're looking to upgrade, you just simply don't have a backup solution right now that you're happy with, PSM may well be a good solution for you. So a couple of benefits on it. One, you can have multiple storage devices that you can configure how they work and when they work. You can set specific limits on them, so you really can control how much they're used. You can move your backup data between the storage devices fairly easily. You can get one of the big features if you're running an edition of Informix that supports it is being able to do parallel backups. So you can actually back up multiple DB spaces at the same time. It gives you, with Onbar, the ability to do a point-in-time restore. So rather than just saying, I want to go to this particular log or my last level 1 backup, you can actually say, I want to back up to 3 p.m. yesterday afternoon. So if you have a developer that dropped a table at 3:51, you can go restore your backup to another system at 3:50 and get that table back. Obviously, there's also other tools to restore an individual table, but there are plenty of reasons why you may want to go to a particular point, exact second on your restore point. It allows a couple of different storage device types, including STDIO if you want to go to raw devices. It goes obviously to file system. It also, they've introduced in version FC10 of 12.1, the ability to go cloud devices. So if you've got like an Amazon S3 or a software instance, you can actually set up your PSM management to actually back up directly to it with no third-party tools needed. So it has a couple of parts to it. The first one is catalog. This is, if you've worked with old SE or another type, it's actually stored in CISAM table format. So it's actually flat files that are outside of the engine. The reason for this is because if you're restoring an engine, you can't have the engine, you don't want the engine already running to have to manage it. So it's in a set of flat files, which also makes it easier to back up and manage your PSM instance by itself. You have a primary storage base for all the backups on your system, so it'll back up all the files you need to restore Informix. Everything is handled in a single catalog, so that'll have all of the information about all your devices, your individual groups of backups, as well as the individual objects, each log file, each backup file, everything else. We're going to go into all these in depth. So the one thing to note with the catalog, and it is a single directory, is you need to back it up by itself. So however you do your file system backups, you need to make sure you do your catalog backup at the same time. By default, it runs out of your Informixter/PSM. So if you're already backing up your Informixter, you're already taken care of. Otherwise, just make sure it gets included into your file system backup solution. The other nice thing with the catalog, you can easily migrate it. I have a real quick example of how to do that at the end. So it is very easy to move the catalog from one system to another without having to rebuild it all. The second part under the catalog is you'll have a series of pools. They are a container that holds all your information on all of your backup devices, whatever type of devices they may be. You can have 3 active pools at any point. You have 3 types. There's the data pool, which is all of your Informix data. You have your log pool, which is for your logs, and then external objects, which the external objects are basically offline data. You don't directly back up to the external pool, but you can use it to stage data in that pool to be able to migrate to a new system and easily import into another PSM instance. So it's really useful if you want to do a backup to your system. It allows you to make a copy of that backup that then you can transfer and restore onto a remote system fairly easily. If you've ever done this with restoring on ONTAPE, where you do an ONTAPE to a directory, tar it up, send it over to a new system, then ONTAPE restore on that system, same kind of principle, but you have a pool specifically for that. You can also have other pools on the system that are not currently active. So you could actually have your dev and test pools to do separate restores to off of your production instance and just swap around to your production pools versus your test pools versus whatever kind of backup solutions you may need. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. Under each pool, you have a series of devices. These can be a file, it can be a directory, it can be an STDIO object, or it can be a cloud object. So if you've got, again, in Amazon S3, you could set that as one of your devices. Pool can have a mixed type of device, so you could have one device that is a directory, and then your second device, if the directory is full, it'll go to, let's say, an Amazon S3 cloud. Any number of ways you can configure it. Each device, you have a priority, so highest, high, low, and read-only. Read-only is very nice because if you're doing testing on a system and you want to make sure you don't overwrite particular devices, you can set a pool to be read-only, so you make sure that you don't accidentally delete anything from it or otherwise mess with the objects on there. What will happen is when you perform a backup, it'll look at all the devices in the corresponding pool, go to the one that is the highest priority that has space free, and just start from that point. And if it fills up, it'll go to the next highest, and so on. You can modify devices after they've been added, so if you need to change priority, change something from highest to, let's say, read-only after you've finished doing backups, you have that ability. It gives you a lot of flexibility. So inside each device now, you have objects. These are the individual backup objects themselves. So this would be something like a log file that has been backed up is now an object. The data DB space that's been backed up is an object. Some of the other files that Onbar will back up are objects. So each of these is an individual object that can be individually managed, tracked, and viewed inside of the PSM catalog. You can also use the PSM tool or the onsmsync tools to actually purge objects and to clean up the catalog. You can also, if you want to, dump individual files directly out to disk, which is a really nice feature if you're doing restore or testing or otherwise. So again, the hierarchy, so your catalog, you have a single catalog for PSM. Under there, you have a different, up to 3 active pools, and you can have as many non-active pools as you want. But by default, you need at least your DBS pool, your data pool, and your log pool. Then under your pools, you have your devices, and then inside of each device, you have multiple objects. So this is a little description graphic that IBM put out. I have a link at the bottom there if you want to go see their description of it. But what you have is your PSM here in the middle that reads from your Informix instance to get some onconfig parameters we'll talk about in a moment. And then from there, your storage tools, Onbar and such, will, based on Onbar, will read from the storage manager, connect over to your Informix instance, and back up the data, which will then, on the left side here, go out to your DB space pools and your log file pools as appropriate, and you can have multiple disks, multiple objects, etc. And again, the catalog has its own storage tables, which are just flat files. So just to think about it, as primary storage manager is just the brain that controls the full backup solution. So it comes with and primarily driven by a command called onPSM. You'll find this in your Informix dir/bin directory, and it's got 4 main flags: -C for catalog management, -D for device management, -O for object management, -P for pool management. They keep it fairly simple. We'll be going into each of these a fair bit more. So there are a few onconfig variables that can impact PSM. That are similar. If you've worked with Onbar before, these will look similar to your Onbar flags, so they work the same way. The PSM ACT log, this is our activity log for PSM. If you've already got the bar ACT log set, it'll write to that instead. It'll write to that if PSM ACT log is blank. There's the catalog path. If you want to set that to put the catalog into a different location, you can actually set the PSM DBS pool if you wanted to predefine what the DBS pool is called, or if you want to change what the DBS pool is called. You can also use this as an environment variable. So if you want to do on a command line, you're doing a testing environment, you want to have a separate pool for your test environment from your production, you can set the environment variable of PSM DBS pool to another value and use that pool instead. The PSM debug is just setting your debug level for it, and the debug log if you want to use, change the output directory for your debug information. And the log pool, just like the DBS pool here, will give you the log. You can change dynamically the log pool to use. So what we're going to do now is walk you through fairly quickly how to actually get going. I've got my Informix 12 instance up and running, and I need to create a backup solution. Great. This is going to take you step by step through setting up a fairly basic PSM setup. So the first step is making changes to your onconfig file, then setting up your target directories for your devices, create or modify your pools, then we are going to add our devices to the pools, and then we do actually perform a backup. Again, end to end, you do this on you're playing with a testing environment. This should take you no more than 10 minutes to just try it out. Obviously, in production environment, it is as complex as you want to make it. So the first thing is onconfig. These are what we really want to set. The first thing is the bar BSA lib path. This is our library that our onbar command will use Again, if you're running Tivoli or one of the other storage managers, you'd have a different file here. But for the PSM, the file is going to be informixter/lib/lib/bsa/psm.so. So you will need to change that onConfig parameter. We probably want to change bar ACT log to just have a friendly location. By default, it goes into informixter/temp. Then the last one is bar max backup. This is actually the number of potential concurrent parallel backups that will happen if you're backing up multiple DB spaces at the same time. So if you need to limit it, you can do so here. Default is 0, which is just as many as it can do at a time. So it may try to spin up more than your disk can handle, depending on how much flexibility you have. So next setup is our file system. So in our case, we're going to do a backup to directory. So we're going to create 2 directories, backup/dbs pool, backup log pool. We want them 770. Change the ownership to Informix. If you've backed up on tape, this should look very familiar. And we want to make sure to use 770, or if we're using flat files, it's going to be 660. So because these are backed up DB spaces, obviously we don't want it world readable because we don't want anyone on the system to be able to go poke around our backups. So the next thing is to check our pools. If we do on PSM-P list, it'll give us a list of our pools that are defined. By default, we have the 3 DBS pool, log pool, and ext pool. For this demonstration, I'm leaving them as they are. If you have a small to medium-sized instance, these should be fine. If you have a larger instance, you may want to have special pools for different tasks. It all depends on your environment. So next thing is to add devices to the pools. So we use the on PSM-D, which is our devices, and we tell it to add because we're adding a new device, and then we give it the path, followed by -G, so we're telling it what, which actually tells it what pool to go into, and then -P, when then we tell it the priority, and then we tell it to #T to tell which is the type, and we tell it file. So what you see here is it actually adds a path device by default with Informix backups, but that is a low priority. So we've added our 2 here at the bottom, DBS pool and log pool, where you'll actually see that priority is highest. So it'll all write to there, and if it fills, then it will fail over to Informix backups. On a production system, I'd probably remove the Informix backup so you don't accidentally back up into your actual Informixter. Test system, do what you want to. So at this point, we've created the devices, we've mapped them to the pools are defined, we are good to go. So we can now use Onbar. So Onbar-B-L, which does a log backup, we'll go ahead and run, and then we can use on PSM-O list, and it'll give us a list of all of our objects. So here you'll actually see where it backed up a series of log files that were full, and then we can actually go in and see the files themselves. I'm going to go into a little more detail and show a little more detail in a demo here in just a moment. For full backup with Onbar, you'd use Onbar-B. It'll automatically do a level 0. What you will always see is root DBS will always back up first and before anything else. Once root DBS finishes, it'll start going through the rest of the DB spaces and start backing them up. I'm going to actually do a demo of that right now. One second while I share my putty session. So I'm going to go back and forth. I have 2 putty sessions. I've already got my environment set up here. So what I've got is, so I've got my standard DBS pool, log pool, ext pool. I kept it fairly simple. I created a few devices. So for our data, I've got backup/D2/backup is my highest, and then under that is backup/D1/backup is my next high. So it'll fill my D2 and then go to D1. For my logs, I've just got backup D1 log backup. I just tried to keep that simple with a single. I do already have a few backups in place. So I'm going to list my objects. And what I've got is a level 0 backup, which is the first set of objects here. I'll explain a little bit more about what all is in them. So all those were backed up at the same time. Took me about 11 minutes. It's about 10 gigs of data, but this is just running on a virtual instance on top of my laptop, so it's not the fastest disks. And then under here, I've got some log backups underneath. So I've got a few logs that are backed up. So all of this is in my catalog, sitting inside of my storage pool. I can interrogate an individual object if I want to. So I can do an object detail, and I'll also some a little more detail on the ONPSM in a few moments. And I'm going to give it the object ID of 62. And it gives me information on that particular object, where I can see the type, where it's a log, the physical location of it, the number of pieces it has, the ID, etc. So all of this information is here, easily accessible to me, ready to go. So what I'm going to do is kick off a level 1 backup using Onbar. And I can flip to my other window while that runs. And I can do an onstat, see my log. And I see that very quickly it backed up root DBS, took about 2 seconds. This is all I've got in this database is some dummy data in the stores demo, so root DBS is pretty empty. And then down here, it kicks off the backup on data DBS and data DBS2. Each one of these is 5 gigs of data. They are about half full, and you notice here is that, a second difference. So it's actually backing up both of these at the same time. If you're used to ONTAPE, you're used to everything coming in serial, so it has to finish one DB space before it moves to the next. This will do parallel. And most modern disks can handle quite a few threads in parallel and not lose performance. So most cases, you'll find that parallel backups are considerably faster than doing them all in serial. And what we can do is go to our Informix temp directory, just left it as the standard bar ACT log. And we can see where it actually started the level backup, and then it connected to PSM, tells us the session, and then started and forked out the backups, the different processes. So it's running right now, and should only take a couple of minutes. So I'm going to talk a little bit more, talk a little bit and then show you what I've had baking in the oven. So again, the onPSM list will actually show us the list of objects. And one of the nice ones, and I'll demonstrate in a moment, is the onPSM-O dump command. This will let you actually go through an object and dump it out to a file. It'll create a file in your current working directory. And so that way, if you need to restore a particular file that it backed up or a particular log or what have you, can pull it out of the system. You don't need to jump through a bunch of hoops. You can just run the onPSM-O dump and your file is back. To actually import and export the catalog, you can use the onPSM-C export, and I will tell you it only goes to the current working directory. And then once that's there, you can copy that, back it up, whatever you want to do. And if you need to restore, you can use the onPSM-C import. It'll look for the same directory in the current working directory. So let me see if the backup is completed. Okay, we are completed. The level 1 backup is done. So we can do an onPSM-O list. And now all of our level 1 backups are here. So you'll see the timestamp, all the ones on 412 to show you what it backed up. And what it does is it creates a directory for each of your DB spaces. So notice we have root DBS here, then data DBS, FB space, etc. And then the backup number, so in this case the level 1, and there will actually be the file and the version. So in our case, for object 80, we can actually see as root DBS, so it's type R. We can see it's the 4th version, so it's the 4th backup that we have done of the root DBS in this particular part of the catalog. And then we can actually see the physical pieces. So this is actually where the file is on disk. Helps if I type correctly. And there are files. So you can see where we have the different versions of the root DBS on a level 1. We have several other versions, older versions there from previous backups I've taken. So these files are there. You can back this up directly, this whole directory structure from your standard file backup utility, and you've got all of your backups there. Another file that is interesting is it backs up our important configuration files, specifically SQL hosts, onconfig, oncfg, and ixbar files as part of each backup you do. So we can do an on PSM-O detail -O, and so we're going to see the individual one, and we're going to look at 90. So this is going to be our SQL host file. And we can see the directory it's located is object type C, which I believe is a critical file, all of our information on it. And we can also do an on PSM, on any of the commands, by the way. If you just do the command, it'll give you a help file. So it'll give you all the syntax. They've done a really nice job of making this fairly easy to use. And actually, let me change directory here. So we can do an on PSM-O dump, and then we can do an O90. So this will actually tell us to dump object 90 to the current directory. And what it'll actually create is the PSM, TCP, etc. The copy named with the object, so you can if you had 5 different SQL hosts, you could dump them all to the same directory and compare. But now we have our SQL host file brought back. This is sample system, so obviously it's simple. But we could do this with any of the files, and it's really useful if you've got a backup, you need to restore the onconfig file from that, so you don't have to try to recreate it. It rolls a lot of the standard pieces into the backup, so you have it all on hand, so you have all the pieces you need to do the restore that you need to do. So the on PSM tool, showing a little bit in there. So there's the -C for catalog, D for device, O for object, and P for pool, and the -H if you need extra help. If you want the catalog, there's a lot of features in here that I'm getting into a little more advanced, so I don't have it all detailed in the slides, but I'm just mentioning it in case you start using it. There's the check utility that'll actually do a validation on your catalog. Detail if you want to actually see information about the catalog. You have the export import I talked about, so you can easily dump out the catalog if you need it to another location. You could use the init if you basically need to wipe it all out and start from scratch. If something's locked, you can use the unlock tool or the unlock feature to unlock it. There's a number of options there. There is the on PSM-D. So this is actually if you want to add a device. If you're running an older version of Informix before XC10, you'll not see the T-Cloud option, so it's S3 or Swift providers. 10, you'll see it as an option. SCDIO, you've got those. File, you can actually set a file size and block size if you need to, or you can just use a path if you want to use a directory. So there's a bunch of options if you want to add or delete objects, as was shown in the example. So the next one is, so we've done that. There is pool, which is pretty straightforward, add, delete, or list. Again, nothing up my sleeves, 3 simple ones. And then the on PSM-O for the objects. So we can, delete objects, detail, dump, or list. So let's go ahead and delete some objects. So we've run out of room. We need to delete something. So we can actually list out the objects. And let's say I don't need all of my copies of SQL host. So I can do a delete -O 90, that 90, the SQL host we just created. Prompts us, we can obviously use -Y. And it's gone. So if we need to go out and clear out some of the old backups, we don't have to clear out the entire backup. We can just clear out some of the pieces if we need to, some of the large files, some of the DB spaces, but maybe want to keep all the copies of the onconfig. We can do it manually. We can do it, automatically if we need to schedule things. It all depends on how your environment may work. So the next part I just want to mention here is the onsmsync tool. This has been with Informix for quite a while. It's part of the Onbar package. If you're running Onbar with a commercial storage manager, you're probably used to it. It is mainly used to synchronize the storage manager with the Informix storage tables, and in our case, the PSM tables. So to go out, read the storage manager, see what devices are there, what Tivoli is saying, what PSM is saying we have, compare that to what's on disk, compare that to what is in our tables. And we'll actually synchronize off of the storage manager, the centralized one, to try to make everything sync. So if you have an IXBAR file, you've got 15 years worth of records in there, but we really only keep 2 weeks worth in Tivoli or PSM or what have you. onsmsync will allow you to automatically synchronize the two. It'll wipe out all the entries that are not actually there. The other thing you can do is you can actually, I got a question I'll answer in just a moment. You can also use it to actually remove specific backups. You can tell it to remove everything but our most recent, since the last level one. There's a huge number of flags you can use if you're getting into advanced backups with it. The other thing that they added to it is there's now an import and export feature, I'll show you that next slide, where you can actually use the onsmsync to migrate objects or full backups to the ext pool I mentioned at the beginning. What the ext pool is used for is we basically stage files there, just like we do with ontape when we do unload to disk, where the ext pool can then be just directly moved, the directory can be directly moved over to a new system and directly imported into their PSM. So if you've unloaded to ext pool, you can copy that over to a new system and then bring it into their PSM and then do a restore off of that. So it's very easy to use PSM the same way we have always used ontape to easily back up and then restore to a remote system directly out to a file without having to go through a third-party system. For doing things like HDR cloning or setting up a dev environment or whatever your case may be. So I've got a question here. I got a question. Hey, Tom, does PSM support the PIT TLR features of ARC checkers? That point-in-time table-level restore. It should, as far as I'm aware, all of the features of ARC Checker are available. Point in time is definitely available with Onbar. I was going to demo it, but when I tested it on the system, it took about 15 minutes, and I don't want to sit there watching the status going while it's running. But I'll show the syntax in just a moment on that. With the ARC Checker, I believe it will. I have not tested that fully. So it's on onsmsync. So the ext pool, a little more on that, is just it's useful with the onsmsync to actually migrate data. Here's the steps to do it. So you add an ext pool device. By default, the ext pool is there. There's no device applied to it. Create a directory, create an S3 instance, whatever your situation. Add a device to your ext pool. Then you use onsmsync, -E for export, -P, and you give the backup a name. Can be whatever you want it to be. As far as I'm aware, I don't know any limitations there. At least there wasn't any in the docs that I found. and then you tell it what to back up. And you can use the -G to tell it the latest generation of data. There's some other flags there if you want to get a little more specific. But if you do the -G one, what it'll do is give you basically the last full or complete backup, and all of the objects will be copied as that backup name to the ext pool. You can then just copy that directory, so the ext pool, whatever the device directory was, / the backup name, to the new server's ext pool directory. So all you have to do is just copy it over there, and then use onsmsync-I for import. You give it the name, which it'll look for in that ext pool, and import it directly into PSM, and then you can use it however you want to inside of PSM. So it's fairly easy to migrate it. Another feature, and I like to mention this is actually outside of PSM, but it can go hand in hand, is you can set backup filters in Informix. I've talked to a lot of people that don't realize this feature is there, but what it lets you do is, and this will work for pretty much all the backup types, is you can set backup filter and restore filter and actually allow you to go and run the command. It's actually sent through a pipe during the process of your backups or your restores. So it allows you to do things like live encryption and decryption of backups. So if you're running a system before the data at rest, you can actually set it up to do an encryption directly to disk or file without having to go through a step after your backup's complete. This will also let you do it for log files and other types. You can also set it to auto-compress or uncompress backups, which can be really nice. So there are some nice features that can be involved here. And keep in mind, because you're now having to pipe your backup through some other command, there's a fair amount of CPU involved. I've seen some with they're running pigs or another high-intensity backup utility. It can really kill the CPUs, but sometimes for the sake of the amount of space saved, it's worth it. It all depends on your environment. So, any questions? Anything that anyone wants me to talk a little more in depth? I intentionally focused this talk to be let's look at PSM. What does it do? Why do we want to use it? And how do we get going? I did not want to go into all of the deep details, but if you want to know them, feel free to ask. I will answer to the best of my ability. If there is real interest, we can do a deeper dive follow-up, but the main thing is this tool is there. There's a lot of people that I see on version 12 that are still running ontape, and I think at least taking a look at PSM as an alternative may be worthwhile to have better backup management. So any questions? Feel free to use the chat box if you want to ask them. Or feel free if you want to do follow-up questions later on, or if you're watching this after the fact, after it's been recorded and uploaded, feel free to drop me an email if you have any questions, run into any problems, or if you have other thoughts on things how you're using PSM or just things you want to share. I always love hearing what people are doing with the tools. I got the question on, can you schedule it using OAT? Yes. Onbar commands are available to be run through the sysadmin database. So if you set up PSM, you then have access to all of the Onbar commands, which should be all available through sysadmin using the execute function task or execute function admin. And what that allows you to do is use the Informix scheduler, which can be configured within OAT or any other utility through any kind of SQL utility will let you manage your backups through PSM through that. The PSM storage tables, because they are a separate catalog, are not available through OAT. I am not sure offhand, and I will add to the slides if I find out if there is a SQL admin command that supports the on PSM. If anyone happens to know on there, feel free to add in. I got a private message here and I want to share it. I can only say that PSM saved my life 3 weeks ago, and thank you for the presentation. I appreciate hearing that. I'm glad it saved, because Backups are so important. So many unexpected things can happen to systems that having good backup is just so critical. Any other questions, any other comments that anyone wants to share? Okay, great. So I intentionally kept this one a little shorter because really wanted to get focused on the topic. A couple other things that are coming up. We've got, well, my presentation today. May 17th, Lester is, I've got one more comment. Lester Knudsen is going to be talking about optimizing the operating system. This is a really important topic that often gets overlooked. Linux systems are often so fast these days, we just kind of, and have been tuned well enough that we don't really touch them that much. There are a number of configurations that we want to look at for the operating systems that really can make a pretty big impact to your system. Lester's going to do a pretty good dive on that May 17th. Then actually going into automatic Informix range interval partitioning and rolling windows to organize your data with Lester. This is a new feature in version 12. Doesn't get another one that doesn't get enough talked about. Can be really useful if you're using series or sequential data, time-based data, otherwise to be able to really effectively manage your data, how much storage you use, how long your archival process takes, etc. So Lester will be talking about that June 21st. As always, advanceddatatoolscom/informix/nextwebcast will be available. One other question that popped up was, can we sync PSM catalogs using the IXBAR file? I believe we can. If we're trying to synchronize between the IXBAR file and the PSM catalog, I believe the onsmsync utility will allow you to do that. I have not tried modifying the IXBAR file manually with it, but it should synchronize the IXBAR file with the onPSM catalog. We do have Informix training coming up. May 21st through 24th, we Informix for database administrators. This is our class for new Informix DBAs or people that just really need to tune up their, some of the core aspects of Informix. Going to really good really good class to get somebody up and running and to the point of being a very active, productive, effective Informix DBA. We have a lot of people that come to that class from other databases. We've gotten really good feedback from all of them. So we've got that both in May and September. So I will mention, if you or somebody at your company is interested in the May class, it is very close to filled up, so please register quickly. We do all courses either online or in person, so we'll usually have a mixed class of both. So all depending on how you prefer to learn. We make the guarantee that as soon as we have at least one student registered, we will not cancel a class. So if you register for a class, you're not going to get it canceled from under you. And again, register early. We do have classes fairly regularly fill up, so we love to see you here, so make sure to register early. We do have, if you've taken our classes before, we do have new training servers. They're really, really nice. 8-core, 16 gigs of RAM. We're now working with both solid state and spindle disks to get better ideas of what modern environments are like. So they're a lot of fun to play with. So again, we provide a large variety of services, including 24/7 remote DBA support offerings, which is both good for if you don't have a DBA or if you just need a little extra support or somebody to call if something really bad happens. We are happy to do that. We do performance tuning, training, consulting, development. If it's Informix, we can help. So again, thank you. Again, more information, go to our website. I also just want to do a quick plug. If you're in the Washington, D.C. area, we will be having our next Washington Area Informix User Group meeting coming up. It'll be in June. That should be announced fairly shortly. WAIUG.org. Thank you. So again, thank you all for being on, and stay tuned for our next webcast.